What's up, guys? So I wanted to take some time today to talk about body armor and specifically about rifle plates. You know, as a person gets into the shooting hobby, gets into weapons in general, and starts to consider all the different facets where they may be putting, their weapons to use. Another thing that comes into play eventually is the idea of needing some form of protection against people who are using weapons or who could potentially use weapons against you. And that's where body armor comes, into play. And specifically, if you are training with people who use rifles, if you are training for the potential that you may eventually have to defend your family, your loved ones, your homestead against people using rifles, you will be instantly pointed towards, rifle plates and the fact that these are, accessible protection against those threats. Being that I am not law enforcement, I am not military, I am not professionally trained in the use of body armor, and so when I give you my thoughts and my considerations, I'm trying to give you just a general idea of things to think about when you're planning out your own personal kit and, what you might be looking at for your own uses. So please, take all this with a grain of salt. It is not intended to be the be-all, end-all of, plate information, but more to give you some thoughts and to give you my experiences based on the two types of plates I've used. So to get right into that, the two types that I've put, some time in with is these, which are ESAPI plates, and these, which are the AR500 plates. Both of these are size large, which is a 10-inch in this direction by 12-inch in that direction. So just to give you an idea of what you're looking at. When you start to look at what type of armor you may want to choose for your needs, you need to think about your philosophy of use. You need to think about what you'll be using the armor with, for most often, and what kinds of threats you are trying to defend yourself or whoever's using the armor against. These being rifle plates, these are both type 3, which means that they're both able to withstand up to 7.62 by 39 and also 308 NATO and multi-hit with no soft armor backers. So basically these are multi-hit rifle compatible for most of the calibers that you would go up against in a, tactical quote-unquote situation. So this is most likely what you'll want to be looking at if you're, in the same boat as me. So give me 1 second and I'm going to zoom in on the ESAPIs and talk about the pluses and the minuses of those plates first. Then we'll go ahead and get into the AR500 plates and why I believe, at least for my uses, the AR500 tends to fill a little bit more of the, the usage profile that I'm looking for and that you may be looking for. And then, we'll wrap it up with a couple extra considerations or things to think about before you go out and buy plates for yourself. So give me just 1 sec. All right, so when it comes to ESAPI plates, which you see right here, they're basically just a combination of like fibrous or, fabric type material, more like fibers, combined with like resin material that hardens. It's pressed into a very hard flat surface, and then that's basically the construction of a plate like this. In terms of its function, basically the way ESAPI plates work, when the bullet travels towards the strike face here and impacts it, it basically crushes into the plate, and the bullet and any fragmentation is captured within the plate. That's, like I said, not too technical, but that's just a basic idea of how they work. As far as pros and cons with ESAPI, the pro I would say is the weight. Now, in terms of the whole realm of armor plates in general, there are materials like ceramics that come in a lot lighter than ESAPI plates, but they're also a lot more expensive. So that is the trade-off with ceramics. Now, I don't have any ceramics because frankly, I think they're a little too expensive to be practical for civilian use. But, you know, if you have unlimited funds, then you're going to have to make that decision for yourself when the time comes. As far as these, though, the weight at about 5 to 5.5 pounds is not terrible. Overall, when you add 2 of these into your carrier, you're going to be running about 11 pounds extra on your, upper body. So that's something to bear in mind. Of course, 11 pounds doesn't seem like a lot when we're just talking about it, but when you actually strap it on and start, running and gunning, you definitely feel it. It definitely is a slight nuisance. Of course, when it comes to protection versus comfort, you don't wear these plates for comfort. You wear them to protect you. So, that's something to, just bear in mind is the weight. As far as cons, the way I see it, there's 3 main cons with ESAPI plates. The first con to talk about is the thickness. If you look at this plate right here, it is substantially fat at about 1 inch here. Now, the reason that comes into play is because when you've got your, shoulder back here and the plate sticking out 1 inch, and you try to go and, shoulder your rifle, you're going to find that you're going to have the rifle is going to be overlapping this area in some way, depending on how you hold your rifle. Some people may shoulder their rifle way out on their shoulder, in which case the plate will not interfere. Some people may shoulder it really high, whatever you've been trained or however works best for you. I'm not here to tell you how to shoulder your rifle, but for me, I shoulder right in the crease of, my front deltoid and my pec, and it kind of does overlap this area right here a little bit. So it's something you have to get used to, something to keep in mind. A fat thickness of 1 inch does cause more interference than some of the thinner plates. So that's something to think about. The next issue is the shelf life. Now, ESAPI plates are printed with a shelf life, and basically what that is a manufacturer's recommendation of when, the plate materials and everything is in its optimum condition. That's not to say, I've seen tests of plates that run past the shelf life and they've still performed just exactly as they were designed to perform. The shelf life is a man-made barrier. It is not a physical barrier to the actual plate performance. So, don't think that if you have a plate that's gone past its life, that instantly means that it's not going to work anymore. But when it comes to legality, I'm sure the companies that put the plates together need to have some form of, guidance as to when they're going to perform at their optimum. So it's something to think about. The last thing, and I think what is probably the most important factor or deficit to these plates, is the fact that ESAPI plates can be delicate. They can be damaged. Of course, they're tough. They're designed to take a bullet to the strike face and keep on ticking. But when it comes to the sides, that is their weakness. If you take the same plate that stops a 308 round and then hold it 6 feet above the ground and drop it on one of these corners, it is going to instantly change the dynamics, instantly change the protection characteristics of of the plate, and that is not good. If you think about, it all depends on your use. If you're putting plates in, if you're a security guard and you're wearing the plates just to as an added level of protection, but you're not going to be, diving, hiding, jumping around, anything that you might need to do, compared to somebody who might be trying to survive in a total degradation of society type situation, these may work fine for you. But for a person who will be doing all those things, who will be extremely active, who will be diving on the ground and, running the risk of potentially, hitting side surfaces of the plates or whatever, that is a major consideration. So, you know, those are the things that I feel were kind of weaknesses with these plates, and kind of the reason I started considering switching over to an AR500 plate. So now let me grab the AR500s and we'll go over, you know, a little about those. All right, so what you're looking at here are AR500 plates. Basically what an AR500 plate is a steel plate of, you know, extremely strong ballistic steel, and then, you know, basically that's it. A coating on top is the other, you know, aspect to it. These plates have become more popular in the last couple years. That's not to say that they weren't available before that, but in terms of an armor, being used in an armor capacity, in the last couple years I've seen a lot more of these plates. When they first came out, they were just the steel, and one thing that was happening, you know, is that when the bullet travels to an AR500 plate and hits it, it just disintegrates and turns into a bunch of, you know, particulates and shrapnel. And the shrapnel just deflects in all directions. Well, a problem with that is, if you can imagine these plates in your vest and your vest on, a bullet hits the plate and fragments straight up. Would send shrapnel directly into the lower part of your neck, which would be riding about right here. So you would have shrapnel headed straight for some of your most vital arteries, including your, you know, basically that's it, going straight into your main arteries. So, you know, into your jugular vein. So what they did was, you know, a couple of the better companies have come out with a coating, which is basically something like a rhino lining. That's a spray-on type of, you know, it might not be that brand, but it's that type of idea, spray-on coating. And what that does, when the bullet travels into, you know, past the coating and hits the plate, it fragments, but the coating captures all the fragmentation, everything, every part of the bullet inside the coating. And so you end up, you know, catching all of that under the coating. Is my recommendation that you definitely, if you're considering AR500 armor, definitely buy with the spall protection. And in my opinion, there are two companies that produce the top level plates that have the best spall protection, and that is this company, which is this is the Spartan Armor, you know, AR500 armor plates by Targetman LLC, and there is also AR500.com. Both of those companies have, as far as I've seen, have been very reputable, and their plates have been proven to stand up to quite a bit of punishment without, you know, any kind of spalling happening. So that's my recommendation as far as that. Now, when it comes to the pros and cons of these plates, we'll just talk about it. The con in this case would be the weight of these plates. These plates are substantially heavier than the ESAPIs at 8.5 pounds apiece. So if you look at the overall package of a front and back plate, you're basically putting 17 pounds on, you know, your upper torso. Is basically about 1.5 times as much weight as the ESAPIs. You know, it is what it is. I think, to be honest, in a training and you know, survival capacity, as far as surviving, you know, some kind of chaos in society, that could actually be considered a benefit. And here's what I'm thinking. You know, these plates are a little heavier, but training with heavier plates over time makes you stronger. Once you're used to, you know, the inadvertent effect of becoming used to running heavier plates is that you've built more muscle to, you know, offset that weight. And overall, in the long run, being a stronger, more fit person will get you far when you're, you know, relying on your physique to survive. And so, you know, for me, I equate it to something like strapping ankle weights on when you're running or something like that. People add weight to their wrists and their ankles when running because they want to get used to, they want to build more muscle while they're doing their runs. Same exact thing here. Every time you're diving, squatting, whatever, you're doing that with an extra 17 pounds, and in the long run, that will help you build more muscle. As far as the pros, here are the pros that I feel over the ESAPIs. The first one is the thickness. The thickness of these plates comes in at right about a ½ inch, so half the thickness of the other plates. And like I said, when it comes to shouldering your rifle, the least amount of difference between your shoulder surface and the plate surface means the least amount of awkwardness when you go to shoulder your rifle. So at a ½ inch, these are a definite improvement over the ESAPIs. The next thing, in terms of the shelf life, AR500 plates are steel plates, completely coated. They have no shelf life. They will be just as good today as they are 10 years from now, and they are completely resistant to corrosion or anything that might get in because it's a completely sealed package. It is completely covered, completely coated, completely sealed. Nothing can get in. Therefore, these have no shelf life. Of course, in the capacity of a citizen who buys armor for themselves, no shelf life means you buy it once and it's good forever. You don't have to continuously buy plates. The last thing, and I think the thing that is the most important, is that these plates are not fragile whatsoever. They do not require special care. They do not require any kind of special storage conditions. They are steel plates. They can be dropped on concrete. The steel is harder than the concrete. You are not going to have any issues. You may scuff or chip the coating, but the coating is almost like a rubberized type of feel to it. So it's bound everywhere to the plate. It's not like if you chip a little nick off right here, it's going to affect the integrity of the plate all the way over here. These plates are tough as nails, and that is another thing. When you are fighting to survive and doing everything it takes, you never know what kind of situations you're going to put yourself in. You never know what your plate's going to have to withstand. These plates, can withstand pretty much anything from all sides, all angles, all corners, basically overall. So one more, let me give you a couple more thoughts. I'm going to grab the ESAPIs, bring them back into frame, and I'll give you a couple more thoughts before we call it a day. All right, so one last thing to think about when you're buying plates is, something I mentioned earlier basically, but you really need to think about, what capacity these plates are being used for in your specific role. The shelf life and the cost and everything comes into play with these plates depending on what you're using them for. If you are military or law enforcement and the government budgets to replace your armor on a regular basis, they want you to have the best protection possible, for the most part, and they put into their budget for replacing defective goods or goods that they feel are not up to the pinnacle of their efficacy. So they'll be funding the replacement of your plates. In that case, running a lighter weight plate may be a better option for you. You may be running it every single day all the time, and in that case, this may be a better option for you. Now, if you're a civilian and you're funding your own, armor, then that's another thing to think about. You maybe can't afford to buy a plate that costs, $200 and then, 3 years down the line have to buy another plate that costs $300. You may be looking for the buy it once solution. And in that case, buying something like this makes more sense. In terms of cost, when it comes to armor, you can go really high in cost. as far as the pinnacle of the ceramic plates, they can be anywhere from 5 to 900 for a pair of plates. When it comes to the ESAPIs, these can be anywhere, when you buy them brand new, anywhere from 4 to 800 for a pair. And when it comes to these, another benefit of these is that these usually come in around maybe $200 to $300 for a pair. So you only pay $200 to $300 and it lasts a lifetime. It's a one-time purchase, as opposed to paying 5 to 8 or whatever, 4 to 8, and having to replace it in 3 to 5 years. To me, it just seems like if you were on a budget but still looking for a good solution for ballistic protection, these AR500 plates are the way to go. The last thing to think about, I'm not sure if you've ever seen the movie Devil's Reject, but at the beginning, they're going into a head-to-head, law enforcement versus hillbillies, and the hillbillies are inside their house with steel armor masks and steel armor plates on, and they are taking hit after hit after hit after hit and coming back to keep on fighting and fighting and fighting. When it comes to ESAPIs, they're all rated for multi-hit, but when it comes to ESAPI versus AR500, it is my belief that an AR500 plate will take more hits than an ESAPI plate. You might get 6, 7 hits out of an area, a 5-inch circle here before you start to get to the back of the, material and start to get holes, penetration through the plate. With these, it may be more like, 10, 15, 20 hits on this plate before you start getting holes through it. Now, mind you, that is just an example. It is not the be-all, end-all, and like I said, you'll have to do your own research to determine what's right for you. But as far as me and my belief, I believe an AR500 plate will take more direct hits than an ESAPI plate and keep going. And in a survival situation where you may be getting into multiple conflicts over a long period of time, with these plates, once they're hit a few times, you do not want to trust that plate for another conflict. You would not bring this plate, like for instance, a police officer would not bring this plate right back into a fight, 3 days after he just had 4 shots into the surface of that plate. It would be substantially degraded and you would be in, a very high risk situation. With the AR500, if these plates, took 4 shots in a gunfight and then, you were able to escape the conflict and 5 days later you encountered another group of people and got into another gunfight, I would have more faith that this plate would be able to act and, come back again for longer. You'd be able to get in more conflicts over time with these plates than you would with these plates. So overall, because my philosophy of use was for training purposes, was for, protection in class, and was for the potential that if society ever degraded to a place where we needed to defend our family and our loved ones against, outside threat, these were the plates that I feel serve my needs best. So that's about it. If you guys have any questions or comments, or you want to incite some discussion about this topic, please feel free to comment below. The purpose of this video is not to incite a war between people who love ESAPI plates and people who love AR500 armor. They're both great plates. They'll both do a great job of protecting you, but they have different characteristics, so it's something to think about. So just try to keep it cool in the comments, and bear in mind that this is one man's opinion and not a law enforcement or military guy, but just a civilian basing my opinions on my own experience. Other than that, I hope you guys found this video interesting and got some information and gave you some stuff to think about in your search for personal protection armor. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and till next time, take it easy.